Always do there are. No more, no less. A master and an apprentice.
Learn from the master, I must.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Afternoons with the Ambassador. And with me today, I have got my good friend and my Padawan learner, Mountains of Elysium, or Padawan of Elysium. And today, we're going to start a little discussion, just talking about Star Wars lore, and from a diehard, hardcore, all go, no quit Star Wars fan to a novice. So, Mountains, I am honestly, you and I, we were talking offline and everything on Twitter. It's been about a week or so ago, and you were like, "Yeah, I'm gonna sit down and watch Rise of Skywalker with the missus and everything." And I'm like, "Good luck, you'll need it." And you were like, "So." But you were like, hey, you know what? I got an idea. Why don't we do a discussion? You know Star Wars. I don't. Let's talk the lore. Let's talk the history of all of it. And see where everything went screwy and everything with the sequel trilogy. So today we're going to start with, like I said, the prequels. And Elysium, I'm going to open the floor. What would you like to know first?
I suppose, kind of, for me, I've seen all the movies. Well, the 9 movies and the 2 pieces, and Solo and Rogue One. Mm-hmm. And way back in the mists of time, I've seen the holiday special and the original cartoons that were out in the 80s. That's it. I know that's my knowledge of Star Wars. I know from the suddenly midichlorians came into it in the prequels. Mm-hmm. And how much dare the Force? I have no idea. The prophecies of balance to the Force. I mean, it's such a big universe. Mm-hmm. And as I said, I am the learner here. So
okay,
it's probably best to learn.
Okay. Well, if there's one question you'd want to start with, what would it be? So,
I suppose, where does Anakin seem to himself appear from nowhere? What's his?
Okay. All right.
How does he come into this?
Actually, that's actually a pretty good place to start. Okay, in terms of Anakin's origins, there is one overarching opinion that most fans hold to. If you ever have the opportunity, and I know I'm going to be referencing a lot of stuff you may not follow, but there's actually a novel called Darth Plagueis. And I actually just recently listened to the audio version of it, and it takes place several decades before the events of Phantom Menace and actually leads into Phantom Menace. It deals with Sidious, or Palpatine's master, Darth Plagueis. So, in terms of where does Anakin come from, because you remember the line when Shmi's talking to Qui-Gon, there was no father. I conceived him, I gave birth, but there was no father. A lot of fans accept this explanation as canon. The explanation is Anakin was a response to Plagueis and Sidious trying to manipulate the midichlorians or the Force in such a way as to where it would tip in their favor, where it would be saturated more in dark side than it would in light. What happened is the midichlorians chose Shmi, in a manner of speaking, and through her gave birth to a being, and everything in this case, Anakin Skywalker, that would bring balance to the Force, that would tip it back in the right direction. So, essentially, the midichlorians used Shmi to conceive Anakin. That's why he has no father. Now, there is another theory that Palpatine and Plagueis, or just Palpatine acting alone, manipulated the midi-chlorians to create life. And in this case, in this particular instance, specifically Anakin. And there are several people who feel that Palpatine was, or either Palpatine alone or Palpatine and Plagueis were responsible for Anakin's conception.
And just with that, as I'm thinking of the sequels, would Snoke be a mistake? Then he was the same sort of thing, drawn from the Force, but not as perfect.
Well, we don't know much about Snoke, unfortunately. Now, that's something I'm actually going to address in my fan fiction, but that's a discussion for another time because I don't want to spoil anything. I have not read any of the novels in reference to, in particular with in terms of the sequel trilogy. Pixelated, good afternoon. Thank you, and I had a great time. Then, thank you for coming by. I appreciate it. So, but no, Snoke. As I said, we don't know much about Snoke's background. I personally don't know much about Snoke's background. We don't know where he came from, what his motivations were per se, except for essentially turning Ben to the dark side and killing Luke. And essentially, he was just a stand-in for the Emperor. But beyond now, in terms of what they did in Rise of Skywalker, where they claimed that Snoke was just a puppet of the Emperor because the Emperor had been alive the whole time, that was a huge retcon. Yeah, and Aberjam actually brings up a good point that kind of elaborates on what I just said. The Force conceived Anakin to bring balance to the Force, which he did by becoming Vader and joined the greatly outnumbered Sith. So, yeah, Aberjam, that's a good elaboration upon what I told Mountains. Or, yeah, so thank you for that. And to Poindexter Lounge, Enosh Fett, good afternoon, sir. Pleasure to see you, sir. Enosh, I'm trying to teach Mountains here about the about the prequels. Yeah, Poindexter, you're good. Enosh, you're good, my friend. As always, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for popping by. Yeah, unfortunately, Mountains does not know Mountains does not know the lore as well as you and I do. So, and folks, if any of you are not already subscribed to Poindexter Lounge, I highly recommend you do so. He is a great channel. He is a great YouTuber. He does a lot of positive content. He does a lot of live streams. He does call-in shows and all of that, all those other things. And if you have not known, he has been on the ambassadorial wing on a few occasions, and I'm hoping to have him back on again in the near future. So, but yeah, getting back on point. Yeah, essentially, Snoke should have been the villain throughout the entire sequel trilogy. Bringing Palpatine back in at the last minute was a huge misstep. At least I think.
So we're kind of dealing with the prequels, but I'll just say that he did look his most menacing of any movie in the Rise of Skywalker. He really did look a menacing figure.
Conceptually, yeah, he looked menacing, but for me, that was not the Palpatine that we got to know in the first 6 movies. Palpatine was never that dumb. So.
And that's why I'm here to learn, because I looked at these movies just for entertainment, never really scratching the surface more.
And you know what? And that's okay. You know, if you just want to watch them and be entertained, that's fine. If you want to learn about the lore, well, that's why you're here. And to the chat, Master of None, pleasure to see you, my friend, as always. Poindexter, this is where you and I are going to have a little debate at some point. But yes, I know that particular version of Palpatine was a clone, but it doesn't work. Bring him in at the last bloody minute doesn't work. But we're getting off track here. I'm trying to teach mountains. I'm trying to teach my Padawan here. Y'all quit interrupting. Go away. Shoot. I'm kidding. I kid. So, anyway.
Though I will have to say, from the prequels, I am a little older than Anakin, and they did say it was dangerous to train one who is beyond a certain age. So what fears do you have for me learning the lore?
None. Knowledge is a tool. What you do with it is up to you. It's a choice. Now, in terms, let's see. What else would you want me to clarify for you in terms of lore for the prequels?
I suppose like they say, the Sith have always been that they haven't been there in a while, and Palpatine and there was Darth Maul. So were the Sith always there, or did they just arise close to the time of the prequels?
Okay, the Sith. Okay, put on your learning cap because this is going to get complicated.
If only I had the avatar to switch. Thinking cap on.
Now, Poindexter, that's not true. I am telling Mountains the lore. It's not necessarily from my point of view. It's from a joint point of view, not mine alone. So, anyway, no, the Sith actually existed long before the prequel trilogy. Now, the term Sith is not necessarily tied to an ideology of the dark side itself. Oh, Enosh, what am I going to do with you? Ha, ha, ha. Anyway, okay, as I was saying, the Sith were a race of aliens and everything. Reds. Poindexter, cut it out. The Sith were a people. They were an alien race that had existed long before the Republic was, or even before the Jedi Order was even a thing. The term Sith referred to, as I said, this alien race that we were actually introduced to in the EU and the expanded universe. And they were introduced in the Dark Horse comic line. I know, Poindexter, love you too, man. So, over time, a group of okay, back on track. Focus. The Sith were an alien race. Let's just leave it short and simple. A group of Jedi that were excommunicated from the unified body of the Jedi Order came to the world of Korriban, which was one of the home worlds of the Sith people. Yes, Enosh, I know, but you know what? To some of us, it is still canon. Don't make me mute you, Enosh. I like you. Over time, those Jedi... Enosh? I'm teaching Elysium what I have learned. To me, and to a lot of people, the Sith homeworld is Korriban, not Moraband. So, these exiled Jedi, over time, interbred with the the Sith people. And throughout the centuries, eventually to the time of Darth Bane, the Sith were known as practitioners in the dark side of the Force. So that's where the term Sith comes from. The ruling class of the Sith Order, or the dark side wielders, were known as Dark Lords of the Sith. That's why Sidious refers to Vader / Anakin as a powerful Dark Lord, or a powerful Sith. But the Sith were not tied to a particular ideology. Were they strong in the dark? Were they strong in the Force? Yes, they were. The Sith people themselves. But over time, the term Sith just became synonymous with anybody that wielded or was in tune with the dark side of the Force rather than the light side. Does that explain it clearly enough for you, Mountains?
Yeah, it's a lot. A lot of this lore, I suppose there's so much of it to take in. And in the movies, I was just going, so there's Sith, there's dark side, but there's only two. Where did they come from? Yeah,
okay.
So this is helping to clarify things up.
Okay. In terms of the rule of two, that actually came from Darth Bane, which was the founder of the rule of two, although him and several other Dark Lords didn't always necessarily adhere to that particular rule all the time. But the rule of two and everything that Bane established and everything was that there would only be two Sith Lords at any given time. A master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it. To kind of expand upon the whole rule of two.
Okay. That's why I was wondering. I've heard like the rule of two, and then there was what was Christopher Lee's character?
Darth Tyrannus, or Count Dooku.
Count Dooku. Yeah, yes, Count Dooku. At the same time, there was Darth Maul. So I was wondering.
Well, the thing you have to remember is, even though in terms of the Sith Lords that worked under Palpatine, they were ultimately placeholders. Now, you learn about this in the Darth Plagueis novel. Once Palpatine discovers Anakin, he's using Dooku as a placeholder until Anakin can be tempted and turned to the dark side. The end game was to get the Sith Lord and everything that would be the most powerful. Anakin was in fact the most powerful Force wielder around. I mean, when Sidious says to Yoda in Revenge of the Sith, "You will not stop me. Eventually, Darth Vader will become more powerful than either of us." Palpatine was right. He wasn't lying. He wasn't BSing. Because Anakin's midi-chlorian count was so high. Now, I'm going off of what was said in the movies and what has been said in a lot of other material, books, comics, the whole Megillah and everything, including the Clone Wars animated series. Anakin's affinity to the Force was so powerful that he could have, if he had not been crippled and everything on Mustafar, if he had returned from Mustafar, if he had defeated Obi-Wan, he would have eventually been powerful enough to defeat Sidious, and then he would have taken over as the Dark Lord. So,
okay,
yeah, on Poindexter Lounge, that's true. A lot of times, an average Jam's like, midi-chlorians can kiss my butt. Yeah, I get why some people are kind of grumble about the whole midi-chlorian thing, and I get it. But I think what Lucas was trying to do was add a different dimension and everything to the Force, which I can appreciate. Yeah, Poindexter, the Darth Plagueis novel, it is fantastic, and especially if you get it on Audible. Daniel Davis and everything does the narration, and he does an extraordinary job. Daniel Davis, if you don't know who he is, for you Star Trek fans, He actually played Moriarty on TNG. And everything, the holodeck projection of Dr. Moriarty and everything from Sherlock Holmes, and he was also Niles and everything from The Nanny. He was the butler, which you gotta love Niles. I'm just saying. Anyway,
I was wondering,
yes.
was like the explanation for the Force being the midichlorians? I mean, it wasn't in the original series,
Yes.
and I was kind of going, well, maybe as there was only Luke and Obi-Wan left for the original series, so he wouldn't have needed to explain about midichlorians, or it could have been explained off screen. But would you have preferred yourself to leave it ambiguous, that they never mentioned midichlorians, just knowing this boy is really strong with the Force? Or not to be quantifiable by science, by Qui-Gon used that machine to measure young Anakin's midichlorians. Would it have been better, in your opinion, to leave that out, or Star Wars lore?
Honestly, I was okay with the whole concept of the midichlorians. I'm assuming you have seen the original trilogy. Am I correct?
Oh yes, I've seen like all the movies I've seen, and like the Solo and Rogue One.
Okay, all right. Let me put it to you this way, Elysium Mountains. If you look at the era in which the prequels takes place, they have a lot more scientific equipment at their disposal, in particular the Jedi. They have a biological understanding of the Force, but that does not necessarily diminish the mystical or metaphysical aspects of what the Force is to a Jedi or a Sith. In terms of, so the way Qui-Gon explains it to Anakin there on that platform on Coruscant, and Anakin says, "I don't understand," and Qui-Gon is, "Don't worry, in time you will." And to the chat and everything, just a quick comment on what Aberjam UK said. Lucas is not a good writer. He's an ideas man, left unchecked on a script, he makes a mess. And oftentimes, yes, that is sad, but very true. And yeah, Aberjam, you're also correct. You don't need midichlorians to measure Force strength. Force users can sense each other without needing a Geiger counter. That's true. Yeah. And MB Geek, let's talk. Good afternoon, my friend. Good to see you, as always. So, personally, I can take both ideas and kind of meld them together in a way that makes sense to me. It can be a both and. It doesn't have to be an either or. So,
because I know, like both of us, you're coming from someone who knows the lore is steeped in it, and I'm just coming to Star Wars for entertainment. And this is something we can both enjoy. And this is great that I'm learning more of the lore, that I can get to enjoy it. And that's what I asked about the midichlorians, because for me, I like the mystery from the first one, where it came from. The fact that midichlorian didn't distract from it. And
yeah, because they, except for what they talk about in the Phantom Menace, it isn't referenced any further. Really, they speak more of the prophecy and everything of the chosen one of the Force. Yeah, MB Geek, let's talk. I would agree, absolutely. Star Wars EU forever. Yeah. And we do, again, that's something else that's alluded to, but we don't know a great deal about. All we know about the prophecy of the Chosen One is the fact that the Chosen One will bring balance to the Force. He will defeat the Sith, and that's the long and short of it. There's not a whole lot more explanation as far as I am aware of anything to it. So, the other. So the other thing is, as kind of round out that particular topic and everything in terms of the science and the fit and the mystical aspects of the Force. I think what Lucas was trying to do was make the Force a little more understandable for a different audience, because as we have progressed in human history, we have become much more scientifically advanced. We have a greater knowledge of the world and the universe around us, and we have done that through scientific exploration. So I think what Lucas was trying to do there was try and give a scientific explanation of the Force without necessarily diminishing the mystical aspects of it. Anything, because if you remember in in A New Hope, Obi-Wan gives a very quick MB Geek, I'll get to that in just a second. For the, as I was saying, what Obi-Wan says to Luke, the Force is what gives a Jedi their powers. It binds us, it penetrates us, it unites the galaxy together. Everything he says, it's a mystical energy field that's created by all living things. That's a little bit of a scientific explanation in and of itself, because as we've gotten more information through EU canon and so on, we've come to understand that the Force is generated by life, by organic life. And the more life there is, the more Force there is. So while it does seem mystical in a manner of speaking, it actually is very much rooted in science. So, and what MB Geek brings up, just a thing, they are a religion that has great abilities. It's not surprising that they learned how to work, and what made one Force sensitive. 10K is a lot of research years. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, very, 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 very astute, MB Geek. Good job. So
that's a thing. I know it's kind of alluded, but the Star Wars universe is old at this stage. That they've been going for, like MB Geeks mentioned there, 10,000 years, so
or more,
or more. So that society technology has been around for at least that length of time. Or am I wrong?
Well, there is a evolution of technology within the Star Wars universe, particularly if you go back into, like I said, the EU or the old EU, what's known as Legends now. With a lot of the comic books that Dark Horse Comics made, they tried to make the technology not as advanced as what we see in the films and what we see in other media in terms of the Star Wars universe, but they still try to make the evolution of technology or the advancement of technology seem organic within the Star Wars universe, because at one point, hyperspace travel is not commonplace. It's actually considered very, very dangerous. Also, in terms of, like, say, with the lightsaber technology, in one of the earliest, one of the very first miniseries that Dark Horse did, and everything, in the Tales of the Jedi miniseries that they did, lightsabers were not designed as we see them in all the films now. Essentially, Jedi would wear a portable battery pack around their waist, and they would have the normal hilt as we have seen, but the hilt would not be full length. They would have a cable that would plug into that battery pack. And I think it wouldn't be until centuries later, anything, that we would start to see the lightsabers that we are accustomed to seeing in the Star Wars universe.
Okay. That's it. Well, honestly, the lightsaber is a pretty cool weapon, and
it's one of them. It is truly one of the most iconic weapons in science fiction.
Yes, I just remember that scene from How I Met Your Mother, where they were carving the idea of going to the future, and they were carving a turkey with a lightsaber, and it just cut to black as he swung at the turkey, and he knew it didn't end well. But yeah, I think it's such a cool weapon, and like not clumsy like a blaster.
Yeah. Yeah, Game Beat Geek, I did read my EU. I wish I hadn't gotten rid of all of my EU because now I want it and it's hard as hell to find, unfortunately. And Amberjam brings up an interesting question for you. Ask Ambassador, why does Obi-Wan not remember his droid companion that stuck with him through the entire Clone Wars? He's referring to R2 and everything. Not so much 3PO because Obi-Wan and 3PO didn't have a whole lot of interaction and everything in the Clone Wars cartoon and everything, at least to the best of my knowledge. As far as I know, I don't think Obi-Wan maybe not even met 3PO until they're on Tatooine in Episode 4. As far as R2 goes, actually, Amberjam, I don't know if you know this. You might. That's why you bring up this question. There is, I think it's a comic or it was a short story or something along those lines, or it might have been a different adaptation of A New Hope. There's a small little exchange and everything when Obi-Wan and Luke and everybody is there on the Falcon and everything. They're on their way to Alderaan. And Obi-Wan walks over to 3PO. Well, technically, MB Geek, R2 was not Obi-Wan's droid. He was Anakin's droid. So, technically, Obi-Wan never owned R2. He was a companion, yes, but he did not own him. R2 was always under the ownership of Anakin, because if you remember in the Genie Tartakovsky shorts or anything for Clone Wars, Padme presented R2 as a gift to Anakin and everything in a real quick scene. But getting back to what I was going to say and everything, they're on the Falcon and everything when they're all back there in the hold. I think Han and Chewbacca and everything are up in the cockpit. Obi-Wan walks over to R2. And he bends down, he kneels down in front of him, and he gives him a pat on the top of his little dome and says, "Hello, old friend." So, and you could even make the argument now. And here's the thing: there are probably millions of R2 units that probably look exactly like R2. So, Aberjam, he did not own him. I know you're goofing. I know you're teasing, and that's fine. And yeah, Sir Nerdlot, yeah, I remember that scene very well. I actually have the Blu-ray of that version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah, that little knife and everything that Zoe Delchenay, I think her name is, or anything. It cuts the bread and toasts it at the exact same time. And I think I even think that the sound effect that they use and everything is similar to a lightsaber activating and deactivating. So, but yeah, that's the long and short on that little bit. Well, R4 was not a droid per se and everything. It was part of the fighter that Obi-Wan had. But the thing you have to remember is most Jedi don't consider No, MB Geek, I'll agree with you. I think the prequels did add a lot to the originals, and that's not just your opinion. That's I think for a lot of fans or anything, that would be a common that would be a consensus that we would all agree upon. So, but the thing you have to remember, Sir Nerd, a lot, most Jedi don't have possessions in that way. They're sort of like monks. They take a vow of poverty in a manner of speaking. They don't have worldly possessions. The only thing they have really is the clothes on their back and their lightsabers. That's the long and short of it. Everything else is just there. So, But that's just interjecting something that I know from the real world into Star Wars. So anyway, Elysium, what else would you like me to clarify for you? What else would you like to know, my young Padawan learner?
Well, I suppose from the lore, was there more to? I know there's the meme going around about Darth Jar Jar. Has that anything, or was that just people having fun with it?
There's a lot of debate about that particular point in terms of was Jar Jar Binks a Sith Lord. I think part of it was, hey, Fiona Wolf, good to see you. We'll see you tomorrow afternoon, my dear. Have a good night, and don't work too hard. So, and thanks for the thumbs up. We appreciate it as always. So, yeah, Cerner a lot. It was his assigned droid. He did not own it. Yeah. As far as the whole concept of Darth Jar Jar goes, I think maybe if there hadn't been such a strong response to Jar Jar Binks in The Phantom Menace, that could have been a storyline that could have been developed and everything, kind of like he was a polar opposite of Yoda, everything except in the terms where Yoda was mischievous and kind of goofy and everything. Yes, and Big Geek, we all know. We know. We know.
Honestly, when it came to Jar Jar, I didn't really like him, and I think I did like that the filmmakers listened, and they put him in the
background.
In the background, but who did trying to do right things in the few cameos he had in the other films. He gave the Emperor his power, and he basically did all the wrong things for the right reasons.
Yeah, and Cerner a lot and everything he brings up. The Darth Jar Jar is a fun rabbit hole to fall into, and yeah, it is. It is kind of a goofy one. Everything, the whole idea that Jar Jar was working with Palpatine or something along those lines the whole time, and he was just kind of misleading everyone, kind of like how in Empire Strikes Back, Yoda is being kind of goofy and mischievous and kind of a pest and everything, but then you finally realize who he really is. So I think like I said, I think maybe if the reaction to Jar Jar hadn't been so negative, that could have been something that could have been developed and everything, and then it could have been revealed that maybe Jar Jar was actually Plagueis. Who knows? Everything, but obviously we got the backstory of Darth Plagueis. He wasn't a Gungan. He was immune and everything. So, what else would you like to know?
One of the things I'd like to know, I mean, I watched these movies, was entertained. Was there something in the prequels that you, who's steeped in the lore, would kind of find, I didn't like that? And what would you have changed?
As far as the prequels, what would I have changed? So that's actually a really good question. Well, the thing is, a lot of the things I would have changed were actually addressed in the Clone Wars cartoon series, because there was a lot of story and a lot of character arcs that were fleshed out. Aberjam, yeah. That line. Okay. One thing that I most definitely would have changed, I would have changed the dialogue between Anakin and Padme in Attack of the Clones. That was one part that I actually found cringeworthy.
Okay, we can both agree.
Yeah.
Because
let's be candid here. There is no couple. I mean, okay, most likely no couple that actually talks that way to each other. I'm haunted by the kiss you never should have given me. I'm sorry. No. Now, am I saying I hate the prequels? No, I don't. My position and my feelings now that I've gone away from a lot of negative YouTubers or anything who have bashed the prequels, my perspective on the prequels has gone back to what it was when I originally saw the prequels, and that was I loved the prequels. I was thoroughly enjoyed by all three. I love them. I'll watch them again and again and again, and I'll watch them a million times over before I'll watch the sequel trilogy ever again. Yeah, Sir Nerdlot, yeah, I would honestly. That is something I would have been interested. I would have liked to learn more about the Sith, and again, that was something that was addressed in the Clone Wars animated series and everything. We got to learn a lot more about the Sith, also in the comic books and everything, because there was a long comic book series that Dark Horse Comics did during the Clone Wars era. No, MB Geek, you're not entirely wrong. But today we're not here to bash on the sequels. That's been done enough. Anything. We're here to train this young Padawan in the lore of Star Wars. So, yeah, honestly, Elysium. The thing I would have really loved is make the love story between Anakin and Padme better.
Yeah, and that's like film craft, and that's something we can both agree on. I enjoy the movies for their entertainment, and yeah, a better story there would have been made the films even more enjoyable for me.
Yes,
and there is no need to change any lore for that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Sir Nerdlot brings up a good point. I'll pop this up here. Attack of the Clones is duality for me. Love the beginning, love the end, but the middle, yeah. I would Sir Nerdlot. I think that's I think that's something a lot of people would agree with. Lucas himself even said writing love stories was never his strong suit, and I would agree with that. I think the most adapt love story that are semi well written love story or let's say romance that he ever written was American Graffiti. For those of you that have ever seen that, I have. And FYI, it's actually on HBO Max right now. If y'all have that, so. But yeah, Lucas has said writing a romance was never his strong suit. And it's most definitely evidenced in Attack of the Clones and a little bit in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, Lucas seems to be more an ideas man than actually bring it to fruition. Give the idea, give the universe, but leave someone else almost put the finer details in.
Well, and that that's another good point and everything to bring up here. Lucas is what we know as a visual storyteller. He does visual stories very, very well. When it comes to like dialogue, that's where he suffers. That's where he lacks. And that's why you had people like Lawrence Kasdan and Lee Brackett and everything working on the scripts for Empire and for Return of the Jedi and everything. And and I'll say this and everything. I know some people may disagree with me. Y'all may go That's okay. And to the chat, happy Dinosaur 8000. Happy day to you as well. And may the force be with you, my friend. Good to see you. Thank you for popping by. And MB Geek, yeah, I've seen your book collection of Star Wars EU material. I've got a fair bit myself. But yeah, that for me, honestly, just to summarize it and everything, that would be the one thing about the prequels I would want fixed is the dialogue and the interaction between Anakin and Padme in terms of their romance and everything, because, oh, good Lord, it was painful at some points. So, anyway, something else.
Just, I suppose, in the prequel, because I understand the Jedi had been going for a long time before these movies.
Yes.
They seemed to me to be almost like the Roman Empire crumbling. They were how do I say it? They were become
They
so
were.
set in their ways that they were unbendable. So when the storm came, they broke. And I just wonder, like they said, no love, no nothing.
Yeah.
It seemed to they seem to be contradictory in some ways. And
Yeah. Well, and, you actually hit upon a good point. The Republic was supposed to be kind of an allegory of the Roman Empire and everything, where you have a dictator eventually come in and take over. So you hit upon something right there. In terms of the Jedi, the thing you're missing and everything. This is something I'll go into. Is the fact that for a long time, the Jedi and the Republic were not interconnected. The Jedi existed as their own independent, for lack of a better term, organization or group or whatever. They were not at the beck and call of the Republic. They were not part of the bureaucracy of the Republic. That didn't happen until much later. I don't think it happened until like maybe I want to say maybe 50 years or more before the events of the Phantom Menace. Anything, give or take. I might be a little off of my time, but there was a time when the Jedi were a organization unto themselves. They operate independently. They would intervene and they would aid the Republic in times of crisis. For example, if you're familiar with the KOTOR games like KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2, particularly KOTOR 1, the Jedi would fight alongside the Republic's military and so on, but they were not a part of it. They were their own independent group. They had their own leadership. Obviously, they had their own council, their Grand Council and everything, or rather High Council. And so on and everything. They had their own leadership. They did their training of their Padawans and so on. They had their own worlds on which they occupied and basically lived. Yeah, Aberjam, it's not entirely. Yeah, Aberjam, I would say that's pretty astute. So I think that's not too far off. Essentially, what happened is at some point, and of course, we have the Dark Lord himself join the dark side. Well, Lord Vader, meet Darth Ambassador. Greetings, sir. So,
and just looking there as the NB Geeks, it's something I was thinking myself that the Jedi feel like an allegory for the Catholic Church. In some ways, like I am Catholic myself, and it does feel like that. That often from my church's history, when we become involved in politics, that's when things go really wrong.
Yes,
it should be outside of the political realm.
Yes, absolutely.
And
I would agree with that.
He does make a good point, and that's where the fall came, where they became entangled in the affairs of men.
Yeah. What happened with the Jedi is they got intertwined with the bureaucracy. They became like a separate arm of the Republic bureaucracy, where they would go on different missions or whatever for the Republic. Because at some point or anything, it was this is lore or Legends lore now. The Republic pretty much disbanded its military and its navy. They had no military arm whatsoever, which was, I think, a huge mistake. It was something called the Rusan Reformation. Aberjam, that's a good one. There were no Jedi choirs, though. Very, very well said. So, but yeah, the Jedi got intertwined with the um, bureaucracy. They became like ambassadors or go-betweens or whatever for the Republic, and unfortunately, they came under. They worked. They would work on occasion for whichever Supreme Chancellor was in charge or anything at the time. And here's an interesting little tidbit and everything you may not have been aware of unless you read the Darth Plagueis novel or listened to the audio version. For a very long time, the High Chancellor or the Supreme Chancellor of the Senate were Jedi. But at some point or anything during the history of the Republic, the Jedi withdrew from that particular role. And they stopped. There was no longer. It was just regular politicians that were heads of the Republic Senate. It wasn't a Jedi that was in charge. Everything, and they kind of withdrew from that particular role. Which if you read the Darth Plagueis novel, some people say that was a mistake. Others say it was a good move. It's open to interpretation. So.
It's I thought he would be more into rap personally, but
Say it one more time.
I was saying, was it Sir Nerdlot said there? Was it headcanon? Young Annie sang in the Jedi choir. I just said I thought he'd be more into rap, but that's just me.
Hey, I'm little Annie. I'm here to say Jedi is the only way. So.
Actually, from the previous discussion, I was just struck that line in Battlestar Galactica where they were trying to use the military to be the police, and that's what the Jedi. When the Jedi are almost religious, and when the religious become the police, there's danger. Things should be separate.
Yes, I would agree with that for the simple fact. Anakin was an emo kid for sure. Yeah, that's a possibility too. Yeah, the problem was the Republic became too reliant on the Jedi, and the Jedi didn't know when to say no. We're gonna back off. You're gonna have to handle things yourself. If you want law and order, start a police force. Now here, or a security force, and a lot of worlds did do that. If you look at many of the worlds that we see in the prequels and in the Clone Wars animated series, a lot of worlds did have a security force, or they did have a military, and so on, because of the Republic pretty much saying, we don't want a military force, and we don't want a navy anymore. So all you worlds are just going to have to fend for yourselves. So big mistake. Very big mistake. So
yes, I think more they could have done with a White Star fleet to keep order.
Yes. Yeah.
And
very true.
Do you think had some force like that been in place, let's say like a paramilitary force, not kind of drawn from all constituents of the Republic?
Yeah.
Would the Republic still have fallen, or would Palpatine have come to power another way?
It is a very distinct possibility. Or what Palpatine could have done was he could have corrupted that paramilitary force to his own ends. Because the thing you got to realize is, being the Sith were hiding in the shadows, working and everything, they could have essentially bought and paid for the paramilitary force, and then eventually just, instead of having a chip and everything in their heads or anything like with the clones, just said, here's credits, go kill Jedi. And that force would have done it. Because unfortunately, every man has his price. And to the chat, Gitter92 and Vegas and 333. Good afternoon, my friends. Good to see you both. Glad you're here. And get you some rest, bud. I'm glad you were able to pop in for a few minutes. So,
There, I remember somebody just telling about the ethics from the prequels of using clones.
Hmm.
That basically they said they were grown. Was it they were matured twice as quickly as normal
Yes.
people?
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
he was saying that would have made them child soldiers. In essence, they had adult bodies, but they were still children in, or how do I put it? They still had a child's development. And do you think a danger lied in that? Or I know it didn't come across that way, but it was just a talking point I heard
No,
mentioned.
that's actually Elysium. That's actually a really good question, and that's actually something that's explored in the Clone Wars animated series or anything on several occasions, especially in the final season. To the chat, Mr. Hyde. Good afternoon, sir. Good to see you as always. So, in terms of the efficacy of using clones or anything, the problem is the only reason that the clones exist is to fight. Rex says it to Ahsoka in the final season. If it weren't for the war, we clones would have never existed. That's true. Anything, but the problem is they were pawns. They were tools of the Sith, or in particular of Palpatine's will and his machinations. So they were, I would say, they were almost victims. Now, could Yoda and the rest of the Jedi said have rejected them? Probably. But I think what they should have done, which is what something that's explored in the 6th season of the Clone Wars animated series, is them uncovering almost all the bits and pieces or anything of how the clone army was created. And the Jedi could have very easily said, this seems very, very sketchy. We're not going to use the clones. We're going to try and raise local militias and everything to go fight instead. But they didn't. Now, that's one way they could have avoided using clones. But the thing is, Jedi believe in preserving life. And taking a life is a very extreme thing for a Jedi, and that's why you very rarely ever see a Jedi kill unless, well, in terms of like the droids, they don't see droids as organic life, they just see them as machines, and you can chop a machine to pieces and not feel anything. So, but in terms of the clones, that's a very tricky situation and everything, because one, you're dealing with the fact that these are beings that have been born, have been created and bred for warfare and warfare only. They exist only to fight, nothing else. And had the Jedi not taken them as their army, then the Republic quite clearly would have been overwhelmed. At least we can reason that it would have been. So,
Just to answer the chat there. No, I haven't seen the Clone Wars. Just pretty much just the movies.
okay. I don't know if y'all have Disney Plus over there as of yet, but they do have the entire. Yeah, MB Geek, I would agree with that statement. Yeah, unfortunately, they were basically slave labor.
Yeah.
Although they were treated somewhat better, particularly by the Jedi and everything, than slaves would have actually been.
I do understand from watching the movies that perhaps had the situation not had Obi-Wan and Anakin, Padme not been captured, the battle not I can't think of the name of that planet where they were.
Geonosis.
Had that not been an issue, perhaps there would have been a pause on using the clones. But then once they were used, there was no. It was like what's that line in Babylon 5? They let the camel into the tent, and they couldn't. Was it? had they stopped at the nose, they might have been able to pull back, but they left the whole camel in, and they couldn't.
Mhm.
They couldn't pull
Well,
back.
there's another term from like the 1940s. We have let the atomic genie out of the bottle. There's no way we can put it back in. In this case, they've let the clone genie out of the bottle, and there's no way they can put it back in. You can't shove the genie back in. You can't put the stopper in before it tries to escape again. So, if you go ahead.
Sorry, this is the question. As now, maybe this is addressed, but Anakin himself was born a slave or raised a slave.
Yes.
Does he show qualms about using the clones in any of the lore or any?
To the best of my knowledge, no, they do not. Now the thing is, Anakin treated the clones exceedingly well. He treated them as equals, as friends, not just soldiers. Now most Jedi were relatively civil to the clones. They didn't treat them as beneath them or anything. They treated them as sentient beings, which they obviously were, because as I said, Jedi value all life, and it's only in extreme measures, particularly in like Revenge of the Sith, where you see Yoda decapitate those two clone troopers because he realizes his own life is in danger.
And
certain lot and everything he hits upon. He definitely shows the clones empathy and everything more so. In particular, if you remember, there's a particular story arc in in Be Geek. I would agree with that. Well said. Very, very well said. There's one Jedi Master in particular. His name is Pong Krell, and I don't remember the name of his particular species, but okay, you remember that one alien Dexter that Obi-Wan goes to visit in Attack of the Clones that has the 4 arms?
Oh, that was almost like had the diner, was it?
Yeah, he's the one that had the diner. Okay, Pong Krell was of the same race as Dexter. I don't remember the name of the race, though. Pong Krell treated the clones very brutally. He treated them not even as human beings. He referred to them by their clone numbers rather than by the nicknames that a lot of them had taken up. He almost unpersoned them, in a manner of speaking. Yeah, MB Geek, that's true. Yeah, he didn't care about the clones. But he also hated them. Yeah. He basically.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was wondering,
go ahead.
Would that have been a something from the Jedi that they did not like taking life, but clones? Maybe these clones, in some ways, to some, would they have been a corruption from the proper order? So some Jedi would have reacted badly towards them.
There's only one instance that I'm aware of in anything where a Jedi rejected having clone troops under his command, and that was Rom Koda. I don't know if you ever played the game Force Unleashed or Force Unleashed 2.
Like you said, for me, it's just been the movies. I haven't played any of the games, none of the lore.
Okay. All right. Rom Koda was a Jedi general during the Clone Wars era. And he basically rejecting using clones because he just didn't trust them. He didn't feel they were as effective as regular troops were. Therefore, that's why he was able to survive Order 66. But by and large, no, the Jedi did not see the clones as a perversion or a corruption of life. They saw them, everything. Even Yoda recognized that they were sentient beings and everything that were unfortunately press ganged into being soldiers. They had no choice. They, like I said, they were born and bred for combat, nothing else. And they spent their lives fighting the Republic's war, and particularly in the Clone War, everything against the Separatists. And The thing I would really encourage you to do, Elysium, if you have the opportunity, you can afford it, is if you well, you could even set up a free trial and everything for Disney Plus. You would have to binge it, but if you watch the Clone Wars animated series, you would understand the whole. You would understand a lot of the ethical questions and everything in greater detail in terms of the Clone War and everything, because there's a lot in there that's explored in terms of and be geek. You're right. You're hitting right on what I'm bringing up. I think it's like one of the very first episodes of the Clone Wars TV series and everything where Yoda gets his ship gets shot down and most of the clones are under his command and everything are injured and everything, and he and the particular clone unit and everything have to work together to survive and save the king of Toydaria. So Yoda says you may look the same, but you are all different. Because they all have their own individual personalities, and most Jedi, particularly those that worked and came to respect and the clones earned the admiration and the respect over time of many of the Jedi. So,
I'm just wondering, you mentioned earlier that I know droids couldn't use the Force.
No.
Were clones capable of using the Force?
Clone troopers, in terms of the clones that we see in like the Clone Wars and everything, the animated series or anything like that, no. As to the best of my knowledge, there were no clones that were Force sensitive or Force adept. Everything, and that's why it was so tricky and everything, trying to create clones that were Force sensitive. Everything. There were a couple of instances. One is in what is now known as Legends and everything, and also in Force Unleashed 2. Yes, justice for TK421. He wasn't doing anything to serve his duty to the Empire. But I don't think TK421 was actually a clone. I think he was a conscript or he was a recruit into the Imperial Army. So there are only two instances or anything where a successful Force-sensitive clone was created. One was the character Joris Sobayoth. He was a Jedi Master during the time of the Clone Wars and afterwards. Everything he was before. It was before the Clone Wars actually began. And the other one was the clone of Starkiller or Galen Merrick from Force Unleashed and everything that was created. For some reason, it's very, very tricky and everything to create a Force-sensitive clone. You have to go through a lot of trial and error. And you have to create a lot of clones, and maybe one out of a dozen would actually be Force-sensitive and able to use the Force to any degree. This is actually something else that's explored in the EU and everything, or Legends in particular. There's a series of comics and everything called Dark Empire. And this is part of the inspiration for the Return of Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker, where it's a cloned body, but it's the spirit of Sidious or Palpatine that actually inhabits said body. But
like a Sith ghost in a way. A Sith Force ghost in a way, like the spirit or the...
No. Sith cannot manifest as a Force apparition or a Force ghost. Only Jedi can do this. And I think this is an ability that's specific to Jedi and everything. Once a Sith is killed or dies, there's really no way for them to necessarily resurrect themselves. Now, they can possess people this has happened and everything, particularly in EU, in Legends, in the expanded universe. They can inhabit their mausoleums and everything and manifest themselves as a force projection of, or not as some sort of apparition or whatever. But a true force ghost is like what we see of Obi-Wan, of Yoda, of Anakin, and so on and everything. It's not something that's synonymous with the Sith.
Okay.
Because one of the reasons is it's an ability that they are cut off from because of their alignment with the dark side of the Force. Because basically the dark side is the amplification of a lot of negative and selfish ends, everything, or selfish needs and everything. That's what is one of the feeding characteristics of the dark side. And that's a whole other that right there is a whole other discussion. And everything in and of itself is the nature of the Force itself, which I don't know if you want me to do a short version of.
Well, I said depending on your time, I'm good for a while. So if you want to,
yeah, I can go for a little bit. Okay, the nature of the Force. All right, I'm going to try and make this as simple as I can. But if you get lost, stop me and I'll backtrack. The Force is neither light nor dark. It is a unified whole. Average Am, that'll be a question here in a little bit if Mountains wants to broach it or anything, he's more than welcome to. And yeah, MB Geek, I felt the same way. Yeah. The Force, as I said, is a unified whole. It is neither light nor dark. Because when the first Force wielders were discovered, they explored all aspects of the Force, all abilities that they could achieve mastery over, whether that was telepathic communication, whether that was empathy and empathic abilities in terms of feeling other people's emotions or their location, telekinesis, moving things with the power of the Force. Yeah, Average Am, that's true. But that's a conversation for another time. The earliest Force wielders explored all aspects of the Force. They didn't see it in terms of light and dark because there weren't necessarily any restrictions on how you manipulate or use the Force. It wouldn't be until much, much later on in the history of the Force wielder order that they would be identified as Jedi or Sith and everything. And again, I've already brought up, I hope I've explained accurately the whole term of Sith. At some point, we don't know exactly how or why. Yeah, MB Geek, that's not necessarily a bad explanation of the Force. We don't know exactly when, per se, in the history of the Star Wars universe or the history of the Jedi, of the Force wielders and everything, when this great schism took place, but a schism took place within the Order, where one side said there shouldn't be necessarily any restrictions on what type of abilities we can use within the Force, and another, well, not so much that, but also how those abilities were applied. Because by and large, the Jedi didn't interfere in the outside galaxy. Yeah, MB Geek, that's true. Anyway, but certain parts of the Force wielder order saw their abilities as a means to control or dominate other people. And the other side of the order disagreed with that. They felt that their abilities were a gift and they were not necessarily meant to rule over others. And unfortunately, a civil war broke out and everything, or a schism broke out within the Force wielder order. And that's where that group of exiled Force wielders or Jedi got kicked out of what would be known as Republic space or normal or anything, and they would eventually come to the world of Korriban and everything, and that's where they set up their own society and everything. And they started, like I said, interbreeding with the Sith people, and you got Force sensitive Sith. So, does that explain the nature of the Force pretty well and what happened with it?
Yeah, pretty much. And just wondering, carrying on from that, has the Force been affected by the people who use it, becoming more polarized, people who have negative that feeds back into the Force and it becomes darker, and the same for the light side, which push the Force further, both sides further from each other, creating the division. Even though as a unified, as one, it's still all one, there's still division within it, coming from the users.
The Force itself is not divided. And that's unfortunately one of the great errors in everything. Yeah, and Big Geek, that's very, very true, and that's something we can discuss here and everything in a little bit if you want me to. No, the Force, the nature of it itself is, I don't want to say static, but it's not necessarily unchanged and everything by how people use it. It's their motivations is what reflects and everything upon perspective, the perspective of the nature of the Force. Say, for instance, you see a Jedi or you see a Force wielder use Force choke on a person who is assaulting another. Would you say that is... now, you can use Force choke to simply incapacitate. You don't necessarily have to use Force choke to kill. And there have been instances of that. If you remember in Return of the Jedi, Luke doesn't kill those Grammarian guards at Jabba's palace. He simply incapacitates them. The Force, in a manner of speaking, to use a line from Obi-Wan, the Force is a matter of perspective. If a person uses the Force to use Force choke to kill a person, then you could say, yeah, that depending on that person's motivations, they're most likely aligned with what would be considered the dark side of the Force. On the other hand, if a person uses Force choke, or say a Jedi uses Force choke to kill a person who is brutally beating another person, or their own life is in danger, or another person's life is in danger, then in that particular application, it is inherently a good act. And Aberjam, yeah, I think that's actually not a bad analogy there. Think of the Force as a firearm. It is inherently neither good nor bad. They can be used for good or bad purposes. Actually, I think that's one of the best analogies I've heard. Now, obviously, something that Palpatine said to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, if you remember this scene or not, Elysium, to know the great mystery, one must understand all aspects of the Force, not just the dogmatic teaching of the Jedi. I would say that Palpatine was telling Anakin the truth in that particular instance. Because unfortunately for the Jedi, they became so afraid and so polarized against one particular aspect of the Force that they saw nothing but dark there. They saw nothing but negative. They have forgotten what it meant to be a wielder and practitioner of Force. For a true Force wielder, there's neither light nor dark. There's simply action, motive, and moral. I would say is a much more accurate explanation. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Because if you think about it, and a lot of people have made this argument, the way the Sith train their apprentices, a Sith apprentice is almost as capable, or even more so capable, than an apprentice of a Jedi. Now, granted, the training methods that the Sith employ to train their apprentices is actually rather brutal. Okay, it is completely brutal. Let's be blunt here. So, because for the Sith, they are trained both to understand all aspects of the Force, but their ideology, their idea that they are meant to rule, that they are seeking revenge for that great schism thousands of years ago that the Jedi enforced upon them, that is what makes them evil. That's what makes them the bad guy. But in terms of their abilities within the Force, there is neither light nor dark. Because there is even a light side equivalent of Force lightning and everything that many Jedi can use. Everything, one in particular, and everything that we see during the prequels is Plo Koon. He was the one Jedi that in Revenge of the Sith was in one of those fighters, and his fighter got shot down by the clones and everything that were flying next to him. That was Plo Koon. He could use an ability called Force Justice, which was a somewhat weakened version of Force Lightning, but it pretty much had the same effect.
Okay. It would have been interesting if ambition hadn't been part of the Sith's outlook, and they who looked at all aspects, they may have been a better force for good had they not, like I think we mentioned, that there was the idea of the rule of two, that they didn't concentrate power, but if they were willing to spread it, they may have been a better force than the Jedi, who were afraid to look at all aspects.
Yeah, because if you think about it, the Jedi hamstrung themselves in many ways. One way that they hamstrung themselves was getting tied up in the bureaucracy of the Republic. Another was, unfortunately, this goes back well before any of the events in the movies or anything else or anything, is that Great Schism. When the two opposing sides within the early Jedi Order, if they had been able to find a way to meet halfway instead of going to war, if the one side of the Force Wheeler Order hadn't been so intolerant and said, okay, these are our brothers and our sisters in the Force, how can we meet them halfway? How can we see their point of view? How can we say to them, rule? No. Guide? Yes. Keep the peace? To an extent, sure. And Sir Nerdlot, yeah. As much as I detest that movie, that is one of probably the best lines. This is the lesson. That the Force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi dies, the light dies is vanity. Yeah. I think that's actually one of the better lines or anything from Last Jedi. And it actually leans towards what I'm saying here. The Jedi became too dogmatic. they became too set in their ways. They became too complacent. They became too, well, somebody said in the chat, too lazy. The same problem was true with the Jedi of the Great Schism era. They became intolerant. They didn't try to meet halfway. Because the first problem was the fact that they started to see certain parts of the Force as taboo, as a no-no, that you don't go to that point. No, in Big Geek, I didn't miss that and everything about religion and politics. Yeah. The thing is, I don't necessarily see the Jedi as a fully fleshed religion. I actually did a video on this a number of back. I think it was early this year or back last year, talking about religion in Star Wars. So, because the Jedi weren't necessarily a yeah, and Jen Spender, good to see you, bud. Been a long time. Is any of this making sense to you, Elysium?
It is, and it's great. As I said, I came in here normie, probably believe in normie, but a wiser normie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to kind of get. Now, I watched the movies. I didn't get this, but
Okay.
this is a wonderful thing with Star Wars, and it's something like we're saying, meet halfway.
Yeah.
Service should be given to the universe to those who know, but people like me who come in can still be entertained while being faithful to the lore, the universe, what's already been.
Yeah. Now, in terms of lore for the prequels, we have, unfortunately, the downfall of Anakin Skywalker, which is the overall thrust of the first 6 films. We have his fall, and we have his redemption. And what you see in both the movies, and even though I know I'm talking about something you aren't aware of or anything, or have rather not aware of but haven't seen, in terms of the Clone Wars, Anakin is a very flawed individual, and he has a lot thrust upon him that most people would have a difficult time handling. He has been separated from his mother. That was mistake number 1. He has been placed under the care of an inexperienced Jedi Knight. It's mistake number 2. He has been made aware of this prophecy that he is supposedly a part of, which I'm going to say is accurate. Mistake number 3. He is headstrong. He is passionate. But he is also caring. He's loving. He's loyal, and he's committed. And I think if Qui-Gon had not been killed, things might have gone a different way. But that's getting into what if territory, and I don't want to skew off that far. The way Anakin was trained was all wrong. Now, do I think Obi-Wan did his level best to train him? Yes, he did. I think Obi-Wan did his very best to try and train him. But I think Obi-Wan even recognizes his own shortcomings. Anything as a Jedi Master and as Anakin's master. And was there a friendship there? Was there a brotherhood? Yes, there was. Okay, that's really my opinion. Seeing Anakin let Mace die. It's saying a similar fate for his son when he moves his mask as a geek. As a geek, read it. Yeah, and be geek. I get what you're saying and everything. that moment for Anakin and everything when he sees Mace being killed. You obviously, and people have done fan edits of that scene and everything. When Palpatine is electrocuting or torturing Anakin or Luke there on the second Death Star. You can almost see the wheels turning in Anakin's mind or Vader's mind and everything, remembering what happened to Mace. I imagine numerous other people that Palpatine has done that to. Yeah, for him that was the moment, but it wasn't. It wasn't the fact that he didn't care about Mace, but this was his son. That was the change. This was his one and only son. This was his only son. This was his child, and he was not going to stand idly by and watch his son be killed. It was love that motivated Anakin in that moment. So, but getting back to my point, Elysium, Obi-Wan did his best to try and train Anakin as a Jedi. But unfortunately, it was under less than ideal circumstances and with a less than ideal master and a less than ideal. Well, I'm not going to throw a whole lot of shade on Anakin. The guy had issues. He was separated from his mother, who was his only family. And unfortunately, he bore a lot of burdens. He bore the burden of being the chosen one. He bore the burden of trying to fight in a war, of trying to save his own skin, not to mention save the skin of his master and his friend. And all the while and everything, he was being mentored by a Sith Lord. But I will say this much at least, and y'all may disagree with me, and that's okay. I think Palpatine treated Anakin far more fairly and far more decently than a lot of the Jedi did. But that's just my opinion.
From my viewing as a normie, he did seem to, well, there was manipulation going on, but the
Yes.
Jedi were far more standoffish from him. He did seem like a whingy teenager, but from what I've seen of the Jedi, he had reason to be whingy.
Yeah, because
not so much Obi-Wan, but with the rest of the Jedi.
Yeah, because think about the enormous pressure all the Jedi were under. Now amplify that for Anakin, particularly during the Clone Wars. He's got a wife at home that he can't be around all that much, and they have to keep their marriage secret, all because the Jedi would excommunicate him. And honestly, if I had been Anakin, and I'm kind of going off a little bit of a tangent here, but I'll get us back on course very quickly. If I had been Anakin and I had been married to Padme, I would have renounced my vows as a Jedi. I would have left the Order, and I would have said, "Y'all have fun. I'm going to go live out my life with my wife." But that's me. Because quite frankly, all the headache and everything that the Jedi gave Anakin over the years, of course, that would have thrown a huge monkey wrench into Palpatine's plans.
Either the Jedi or Palpatine probably would not have let him go peacefully.
No.
Probably both.
Yeah. But that's that's another interesting what if.
Oh, yes.
So, and MB Geek, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I look at this logically. What's the big deal about being a Jedi? You're separated from your family. You're around a bunch of stuffy old men and women and aliens. You're not allowed to love. You're not allowed to feel. You're not allowed to have relationships. You're not allowed to have property. You're not allowed to. It's a big list of no, 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 no. But with the Sith, okay, yeah, they're evil. We get that. They want to rule everything and control everything. Yeah, that's. And, there have been many channels that have argued the efficacy of the Empire itself. And that's an interesting rabbit hole to go down in and of itself. But think about it. If you're a Sith, you can have a wife, You can have a husband, you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You can even theoretically have a family. Or you could just reject both sides and say, you know what, I'm just going to use the Force whatever way I necessarily want without any restrictions. And I'll let my own morals, my own judgment, and my own ethics dictate how I live. And that's actually, for the longest time, how the original Force wielders or the first Force wielders lived their lives. Because believe it or not, the first Force wielders had families. They had children. They kind of kept away from the world and everything. Yep, Jens, that's true too. But quite literally, Anakin could have just washed his hands of the whole bloody mess and said, you know what? Go fight your war. I'm out. I've got a wife. I've got children on the way. I don't need this. You know, it's an interesting what if when Obi-Wan tells him, you have made a commitment to the Jedi Order, a commitment that's not easily broken. I'm sorry. If I'm Anakin, I look at Obi-Wan, I say, you want me to spy on the only man who has actually treated me with any modicum of friendship and respect or warmth since the entire time I've been here. Yeah, MB Geek. Although community does have its advantages to an extent. It does. Community does have its advantages. But getting back on track here. Yeah, for the longest time, the original Force wielders and everything, before they were identified as Jedi or Sith, they kept to themselves. They had their worlds that they lived on, like Tython and like Jeddah and everything that we see and everything in Rogue One and everything. Yeah, the mayor speaking in Big Geek, that's true. So, but yeah, they didn't get involved in the affairs of others. They pretty much kept to themselves. They lived their lives. They had their communities. They had their homes and everything. And they basically they explored the Force. They didn't bother nobody, and nobody really bothered them, unless they were dumb enough unless there was a bandit or something that was dumb enough to try and tangle with a Force wielder. And then, well, most times they'd incapacitate them and everything. In extreme cases, they would resort to killing if they had to. But again, it was all a matter of choice of how they decided to exercise their ability over the Force. So, I hope that made sense to you, Elysium.
It did indeed.
Okay.
And it goes to show you can train a Padawan at any age.
Yes. If you have the patience. And you have the time. And of course, if you have the knowledge. So, any other questions about the prequel era or anything along those lines that you want to ask?
No, actually, I'm pretty good. It's been informative.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think in terms of the prequels, are you pretty well boned up?
I think so. It's
okay.
Like I said, pretty well boned up. I mean, there's so many rabbit holes you could go down that we could be here until morning.
Yes, that's true.
But I'm pretty well up to speed on it, and
okay,
delighted to learn a bit more. Brought a bit more flavor to the show.
Okay, well, if you want to, then next week and everything, we'll pick up with the lore of the original trilogy. If that sounds good to you.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, and then we'll we'll discuss anything where to go from there. So,
Excellent.
okay, all right. Well, folks, I think that's where we're gonna wrap this up. So, and to everybody that has been in the chat and is in here currently, MB Geek Let's Talk, Sir Nerdlot, Jens Pender, Enosh Fett from Point Extra Lounge. Enosh, I don't know if you're still in here, bud. It was good to have you in here. Aberjam UK. I know that Gitter92 is in here. Vegas Sin 333. I know you were in here for a while. And to everybody else that might have been in here that I might have missed, Sir, and I think I mentioned you, Sir Nerdlot. We even had an appearance by the Dark Lord himself, Darth Vader. Glad you could pop in, my lord. Although you're not my lord, but you get my point. You get the joke. And Fiona Wolf and everything, and everybody else that'll catch us on the replay. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have anything that you want to add for Mountains or anything down in the comments, by all means do so. Anything, because there's no such thing as too much Star Wars knowledge. Oh, and also thank you for doing that. The Master of None. Thank you for popping in as well, my friend. Glad you could be here. I hope you enjoy this. We will be back next week with another installment of Star Wars Lore, Master and Apprentice. Just a quick update on a couple of things coming up this week. Tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 Central Time will be me and Mountains. And the rest of the Council of Ones will be continuing our review of Babylon 5 Season 2, and we'll be covering the episode A Distant Star. Everything. So hope to see you all then for that as well. And then this Friday night at 7 p.m. Central Time, I'll be kicking off the ambassadorial birthday party, and we'll be doing a series of watch parties. And this Friday night, we'll be doing the great 90s classic, The Fifth Element. So I've still got a few spots. So if any of you are interested in being on that panel, DM me on Twitter or get a hold of me on Discord and let me know, and I will absolutely shoot you the link. And then sometime this week, I will be doing another installment of my Star Wars fan fiction, Ray Who, and everything. I haven't figured out what day I'm going to do that yet, but once I do, I will tweet it out to everyone. So, and again, to everybody that's been in the chat, I appreciate you all for being here. Oh, one more that I almost forgot. LDG Pixels or Pixelated, thank you as well for being here. So, as always, folks, if you enjoyed the stream, hit that like button, share this out. And if you come across this stream and you are not a subscriber to my channel and you enjoyed this discussion, if you enjoy this type of content, consider hitting that subscribe button and become a part of this community. So, y'all have a great day. May the Force be with you. And since it is Star Trek Day, peace and long life, and live long and prosper. And until next time, this is the Ambassadors signing off.